I'm Elena. I'm 30, and I manage a commercial real estate portfolio in the city, a clean, quiet job that pays for a clean, quiet life, which is exactly how I wanted it. But 8 years ago, I was standing in a hot auditorium in my cap and gown, scanning a sea of faces for my mother, when her voice sliced through the applause. "Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma. These are my guests." She said it to my face, right after the ceremony, with 30 strangers holding Patricia's premiere event signs behind her. I still hear those words in my bones. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, comment me below and subscribe to my channel. Because this story starts long before that graduation, it starts when I was 7. That fall, the week before school began, my mother took my older sister Veronica to the electronics store and came home with a brand new silver laptop. I was sitting on the living room carpet, watching Veronica peel the plastic off her new laptop, when my mother handed me a second-hand tablet. The screen had a crack running from the top right corner down to the middle, a spiderweb of tiny fractures that caught the light every time I tilted it. "It still works," my mother said. "Be grateful." Veronica's laptop cost $800. I looked it up later by searching the model number on the library computer. The tablet shut off randomly. I'd be halfway through a typing exercise for school and the screen would go black, and I'd have to hold the power button and pray it restarted before my homework deadline. I never complained. I'd learned by then that complaining earned me a sigh and a lecture about being difficult. A few months later, Veronica had her winter dance recital. My mother paid $300 for a custom costume, deep purple velvet with rhinestones stitched along the bodice, a matching headpiece, the works. I remember the receipt on the kitchen counter. $297.83 plus tax, circled in red pen, stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. My mother drove Veronica to every dress rehearsal, stayed late to help with makeup, and filled her phone with videos of Veronica spinning under the stage lights. My piano recital fell on a Thursday evening 2 weeks after that. I'd practiced Clair de Lune until my fingers cramped. I ironed my white blouse the night before and laid out my black flats by the door. I told my mother the time 6 times, including that morning at breakfast. She nodded and said she'd be there. I sat on the wooden bench in the community center recital hall, hands in my lap, scanning the door. Other kids walked onto the stage, played their pieces, and walked off to their parents' applause. I kept watching the door. I was the 9th performer. When my name was called, I walked to the piano, sat down, and played the entire piece without a single mistake. The audience clapped a polite, warm sound, but I was looking at 2 empty seats in the 3rd row, where my mother and Veronica were supposed to be. Afterward, I found her at home, pulling a frozen pizza out of the oven. She didn't even turn around. "How was the thing?" she asked. "You said you'd come." My voice cracked. I was 8 years old, my blouse still starched, my hands still smelling faintly of the piano keys. She set the pizza on the stove and faced me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was flat, the way you look at a bill you've already decided to pay late. "Elena, you're just not a priority." I didn't cry in front of her. I walked to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the crack in the tablet screen. That sentence, "You're just not a priority," settled into my stomach like a stone I'd carry for years. I share that because it's the first cut, the one that teaches you where you stand. And if you grew up in a house where love was a pie and your sibling got the whole thing while you got the tin, you know exactly what I mean. By the time Veronica turned 16, the gap between us wasn't a crack anymore, it was a canyon. My mother spent 4 months planning Veronica's Sweet 16. 4 months. I remember the binder she kept on the kitchen island, a thick white 3-ring with plastic sleeves, each one holding a different shade of lavender napkin or a photo of centerpieces she was considering. She booked the Magnolia Ballroom at the Hilton downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows, a chandelier that looked like a waterfall frozen in crystal, a dance floor big enough for 100 people. The catering alone cost more than my braces, which I knew because she complained about my orthodontist bill in the same breath. She approved the shrimp cocktail platters. $5,000. I saw the final invoice on the counter one morning while pouring cereal. $5,247.18, stamped paid in red. Veronica wore a custom gown pale pink tulle with a sweetheart neckline, fitted bodice, tiny pearls sewn along the hem. She looked like a princess from a movie I wasn't allowed to audition for. At the party, my mother gave a speech. She stood at the microphone with a champagne glass in one hand, sparkling cider, technically, but she held it like crystal and said, "Veronica, you are the light of my life and the reason I wake up every morning with purpose." I sat at table 9 in the back, next to a cousin I barely knew, cutting my chicken with the wrong fork because no one had taught me which one to use. My 16th birthday came 6 months later. No binder, no ballroom, no gown. My mother said money was tight after Veronica's party, so we'd do something low-key. Low-key meant a fast food restaurant off the highway, the one with the faded sign and the sticky floors, where the ice cream machine was always broken. Just me, a paper crown the cashier gave me as a joke, and my grandmother Martha. Grandma Martha drove an hour from her small apartment in Riverview to meet me. She wore her good coat, the navy wool one with the brass buttons, and she'd curled her silver hair. When she walked in, she scanned the room until she found me in the corner booth under a flickering fluorescent light, and her face did something my mother, never did. It lit up. We ordered burgers and shared a basket of fries. She asked about school, about my classes, about the history paper I'd been stressing over. She listened, actually listened, while I talked about the French Revolution and my theory that Robespierre was just an insecure man with too much power and a bad wig. She laughed at that. Her laugh sounded like wind chimes, soft and a little rusty from not being used enough. Halfway through the meal, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet pouch, the kind that holds something delicate. "This is for you, Elena," she said, pressing it into my palm. "Open it carefully." Inside was a pendant on a thin silver chain. A key, no bigger than my thumbnail, carved with tiny filigree along the stem. It caught the light from the greasy window and glinted warm gold despite the silver. I turned it over in my fingers. The bow of the key had a small heart cut out in the center. Grandma Martha leaned across the table and closed her hand over mine. Her skin was paper-thin and cool. "One day, this will unlock something just for you," she whispered. "Something no one can take away." I put it on right there in the booth, fumbling with the clasp until she reached up and fastened it for me. The key rested just below my collarbone, a tiny cold point against my skin. I wore it under my shirt on the drive home. 2 days later, my mother noticed the chain glinting at my neck while I was washing dishes. She pulled it out from under my collar with 2 fingers, squinted at the pendant, and laughed, a short, dismissive sound like a door slamming. "What is this, costume jewelry?" Martha always had such tacky taste. She dropped it and turned back to her phone. "Don't wear that to school. People will think we're poor." I kept wearing it. I just tucked it deeper. 3 months later, I won the Northbrook Regional Academic Excellence Prize, first place in a competition with over 400 entries from 12 schools. I'd written a research paper on urban development patterns and their impact on low-income housing, and the judges called it graduate-level work. The awards ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon at the public library downtown. I told my mother 3 times. I left a note on the fridge. Veronica had a dress fitting that day, for her winter formal, which was still 4 months away, but the seamstress was booked solid, and my mother refused to reschedule. Neither of them came. I stood on a small stage in the library community room, accepted a plaque and a $200 scholarship check from a panel of smiling strangers, and gave a speech I'd rehearsed in my bedroom mirror the night before. I scanned the folding chairs. Not one face I recognized. When I got home, my mother was on the couch scrolling through her phone. "How'd it go?" she asked, not looking up. "I won first place," I said. "Regional, 400 kids." She glanced at me then, just a flick of her eyes before they dropped back to the screen. "No one cares about your little achievements, Elena." The stone in my stomach shifted, settled deeper. That night, I took off the silver key pendant and held it in my fist until my knuckles ached. Then I put it back on and made a quiet decision. I would stop telling them anything. Not my wins, not my grades, not my dreams. The less they knew, the less they could dismiss. I started locking my report cards in a drawer. I stopped mentioning competitions. When I earned a partial scholarship to a summer business program at the community college, I forged my mother's signature on the permission form and took the bus there every morning at 6:15 without a word. The silver key hung around my neck through all of it, a promise from the one person who'd ever looked at me like I mattered. I didn't know yet what it would unlock. I just knew Grandma Martha had given it to me in a fast food booth with a paper crown on my head and fries going cold between us, and she'd meant every word. The summer after my regional win, I stopped being a kid and started being a worker. I picked up shifts at a coffee shop downtown at 5 a.m., the kind of place where the espresso machine hissed like it resented you. Afternoons, I shelved books at the public library. Evenings, I did homework at the kitchen table with my headphones on, blocking out the sound of my mother and Veronica arguing over dress colors and seating charts for a wedding that wasn't even Veronica's. I kept my grades up, kept quiet, kept the silver key under my shirt where no one could mock it. When high school graduation came, I didn't expect anyone to show. That way, when they didn't, it wouldn't hurt. I had already learned that trick, expect nothing, and the absence feels almost normal. I sat in a row of folding chairs on the football field, wearing a scratchy polyester gown and a cap that kept sliding down my forehead, and I watched the bleachers fill with families holding balloons and bouquets. My mother didn't come. She sent a text instead, "At Veronica's baby shower, so proud of you," with a party emoji. She wasn't proud. She was making sure I knew where the real priority sat. Veronica had gotten pregnant at 20, unmarried, and my mother acted like it was a blessing from heaven. A baby shower mattered more than a diploma. Fine. By then, I was already packed. I'd worked enough hours to cover my first semester at a state school, and I'd won 2 more scholarships she never knew about. I moved into a cramped dorm room with a roommate who listened to techno at 3 a.m. and burned microwave popcorn once a week, and I threw myself into college like it was a life raft. 4 years, 2 jobs. I worked at a call center on weekends, the kind of job that made my ears ring and my voice hoarse, and I tutored business students in statistics and accounting. I graduated with a bachelor's in business administration, summa cum laude, and the only person who flew out to watch me walk was Grandma Martha. She sat in the 3rd row of a crowded auditorium, smaller than I remembered, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes bright. She clapped until her palms turned pink. My mother called that night to say congratulations. Then she asked if I could help Veronica with her credit card debt. I stopped answering the phone for a while after that. 2 years later, on my 22nd birthday, I was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in the city, working an entry-level job at a real estate firm while side hustling as a property manager for 2 small landlords. It wasn't glamorous. It was barely sustainable. But it was mine, my calendar, my bills, my key ring with 3 keys on it. I woke up every morning at 6:30, made coffee in the same cracked mug I'd owned since freshman year, and told myself that no one could take this from me. Grandma Martha died that November. She had been sick for a while, congestive heart failure, the kind of phrase doctors say gently, like softening a blow. I visited her in the hospital every weekend for the last month. She looked tiny against the white sheets, her hands curled like dried leaves, but her eyes stayed sharp. She'd ask about my work, about the city, about whether I was eating enough. The day before she passed, she reached for my hand and tugged me close. "Elena," she whispered, her voice thin as paper, "you were always my favorite. Don't tell the others." I laughed through the tears. "That's a terrible thing to say, Grandma." "I'm dying," she said. "I get to say what I want." She passed the next morning at 7:42. I was sitting in the hospital chapel when the nurse came to find me. I called my mother from the parking lot. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear kitchen noises in the background, the clatter of dishes, the hum of a television. "Grandma's gone," I said. A pause. Then, "I know, the hospital called me first. Your flight's probably expensive. Don't come all the way out here for this, Elena. It's just a lot of paperwork." I came anyway. I paid for a budget flight that landed at midnight, slept in an airport hotel, and stood in the back of a small funeral home 2 days later, while a priest said prayers and my mother accepted condolences from relatives I barely recognized. I bought my own flowers, a bundle of white daisies from a gas station, and left them on Grandma's casket before the funeral director wheeled it away. Afterward, at my mother's house, I asked about the estate. Grandma had owned a small house, some savings, a few pieces of jewelry. My mother waved a hand. "The estate is small. Nothing for you, don't worry about it." She said it the way you'd dismiss a waiter bringing the wrong drink. Like I was a nuisance. Like my question itself was impolite. I let it go. I returned to the city, put in my 2 weeks' notice at the firm, and started my own property management company from my kitchen table. I named it after myself, Elena Porter. It wasn't fancy. It was just me, a phone, and a lot of early mornings. I worked with small landlords who'd been burned by big management companies, won them over with spreadsheets and detailed inspections, and a willingness to show up at 7 a.m. when a tenant's heater failed. By year 3, I had 11 properties under management, then 14, then 20. I was 25 when the phone call came. It was a Tuesday in early spring. I was sitting at my kitchen table, eating a bowl of cereal, running through a list of maintenance requests on my laptop. The call came from a restricted number. I almost didn't answer. Elena Porter? A man's voice, even and formal. This is Daniel Reyes from Reyes, Lloyd, and Taft. You were named as the beneficiary of a trust established by your grandmother, Martha Porter. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you at your earliest convenience. I almost dropped my spoon. The meeting took place 3 days later in a small law office downtown, a room with dark wood paneling and the smell of coffee and old paper. Daniel Reyes, a trim man in his 50s with graying hair and reading glasses perched on his nose, slid a folder across the mahogany table. Your grandmother set this up when you were 19, he said. She was very specific about the terms. Inside the folder was a deed. A small office building at 42 Maple Street with 6 commercial units and a 2-bedroom executive suite on the 3rd floor. It had been held in trust for me until I turned 25. She knew your mother would try to contest it, Reyes added gently. Martha came to me after your high school graduation. She said, and I'm quoting here, Elena will need something that no one in that family can touch. I sat there, staring at the deed, while my fingers found the silver key pendant beneath my collar. The one they'd called costume jewelry. The one with the tiny heart cut out. The building was modest but solid brick exterior, a flat roof, a faded green awning over the front door. It needed paint, new locks, and a deep clean. The commercial tenants included a small insurance broker, a nail salon, and a bike repair shop. 2 units were vacant. I stood on the sidewalk the first afternoon I saw it, whined, whipping my hair, and thought about Grandma Martha in that fast food booth, pressing the velvet pouch into my palm. One day, this will unlock something just for you, she'd said. I took ownership on a Friday. My hands shook when I signed the papers, not from nerves, but from the strange gravity of it. I had never owned anything in my life. I'd never had a home that felt permanent, a door that was truly mine. Now I had 6. I moved my business into the executive suite on the 3rd floor, the one with big windows and a claw-footed tub in the bathroom. I painted the walls myself, a warm white with sage green trim. I bought a desk from a thrift store and a chair that didn't creak. I hung my degree on the wall and framed the first check my company ever earned, and I told no one. Not my mother, not Veronica, not the cousins who had stood stiff and awkward at Grandma's funeral. The less they knew, the less they could dismiss or take. The building came with a ring of keys. I kept them on a brass ring in my desk drawer, each one labeled in my handwriting: front door, utility closet, 3rd floor suite, roof access. But around my neck under my blouse, I still wore the silver pendant. The key that was never meant to open a lock. It was meant to remind me that I was someone worth leaving things to. I need to take you back now. 8 years. Because you have to understand what that building meant, and you have to understand what she took from me first. I was 22, finishing my business degree at the State University. 4 years of night shifts at a call center, weekend catering gigs, and student loans stacked like playing cards. I'd paid for every textbook, every credit hour, every cup of dining hall coffee myself. My mother hadn't contributed a dime, not that I expected her to. By then I'd stopped expecting anything. But she called me 3 weeks before graduation. Unprompted. That should have been my first red flag. My mother never called me. I called her and she let it ring. Elena, sweetheart, she said, her voice warm in a way that made my stomach tight. I want to plan your graduation celebration. Let me handle everything. You've worked so hard, you deserve a proper party. I remember standing in my dorm room, phone pressed to my ear, genuinely speechless. Veronica had gotten a $5,000 Sweet 16. I'd gone a fast food dinner with Grandma Martha, and now my mother wanted to throw me a party? Really? I asked. The word came out small, younger than I wanted it to. Really, she said. I'll take care of the guests. You just show up and walk across that stage. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I was 22 and still starving for a scrap of maternal warmth, still stupid enough to believe that maybe, finally, I had done something worthy of her attention. Graduation day arrived in mid-May. The sky was that clear, sharp blue you only get in early summer, and the campus quad was a sea of black gowns and proud families. I lined up with my classmates, adjusted my cap, and scanned the crowd as we filed into the auditorium. I couldn't find my mother's face, but I spotted a cluster of people near the back, maybe 30 of them holding signs. I couldn't read the signs from that distance, but I smiled anyway. She'd actually done it. She'd actually shown up. The ceremony was a blur of speeches and handshakes. When they called my name, Elena Porter, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, cum laude, I walked across that stage and heard scattered applause. Polite applause, stranger applause. Afterward, I wove through the crowd in my cap and gown, searching for my mother, and then I saw the signs up close. Patricia's premier events, elevating your corporate gatherings. Book your next gala with Patricia's premier events. Corporate retreats, client dinners, grand openings, we do it all. 30 people in business casual, holding company-branded placards, mingling with graduates' families, passing out glossy brochures. My mother stood at the center of them in a sharp navy blazer, working the crowd like a senator at a fundraiser. She turned my graduation into a client appreciation networking event. I stopped walking. My gown felt heavy suddenly, the polyester fabric scratching at my neck. I stood there holding my diploma in its leather sleeve, while strangers in name tags milled past me toward the hors d'oeuvres table she'd set up near the exit. Then she saw me. She broke away from a conversation, crossed the lawn, and stood in front of me. Her smile was bright and professional, the kind she wore for pitch meetings. "There you are," she said. "The caterers need the dessert table cleared in 30 minutes, so if you want photos, make them quick." I stared at her. "You said this was my celebration." Her smile flickered, hardened, became something else. "Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma," she said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact, like she was explaining something obvious to a slow child. "These are my guests. This is my event. You just happened to graduate today." The words landed like a slap. Not because they were cruel, I'd heard cruelty from her before, but because they confirmed something I'd spent my whole life trying not to believe, that I was not, and had never been, a person to her. I was an inconvenience who had momentarily aligned with an opportunity. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I don't know what made me do it, instinct, maybe, or the part of me that had learned to document everything, to keep receipts, to never trust a kindness from my own blood. The audio file captured the next 15 seconds. "Say that again," I said. She rolled her eyes. I said, "Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma. These are my guests. Don't make this weird, Elena." I stopped the recording, slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I turned and walked away. I walked across the campus green, past the fountain, past the families posing for photos, past the parking lot where students were loading boxes into cars. My cap slipped sideways and I didn't fix it. My gown dragged through a puddle near the curb and I didn't stop. I walked until I reached my dorm, and then I sat on the edge of my stripped mattress, still in my graduation regalia, and I made a promise to myself. I would build a life where I never needed any of them again, where I would never have to hope for a phone call, a party, a scrap of approval, where my successes would belong to me, and only to me, locked behind a door they couldn't open. I didn't know about the silver key yet. I didn't know about 42 Maple Street or the trust Grandma Martha had hidden from them all. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The next time my mother stood in a room I owned, she would not be the one giving orders. I kept that recording for 8 years. It sat in a folder on my phone, then my laptop, then a cloud backup waiting. I didn't replay it often. I didn't need to. I could hear every word in my mother's voice whenever the guilt crept in, whenever some part of me wondered if I'd been too harsh, too cold, too distant. She taught me exactly who she was that day. 30 strangers with corporate signs and a daughter she didn't see. I never forgot the lesson. 8 years, I'm 30 now. My real estate firm runs out of the executive suite at 42 Maple Street. The building Grandma Martha left me, the one my mother swore didn't exist. I manage 17 commercial properties across the city. I have 3 employees, and my desk sits in the same office where I once sat reading Grandma's letter with shaking hands, finally understanding what that silver key pendant was always meant to unlock. I hadn't spoken to my mother in 4 years, not since the lawyer confirmed she'd tried to contest the trust. Not since I stopped returning her calls and she stopped pretending to make them. The silence was a gift I gave myself, and I guarded it like something precious. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The caller ID said Patricia Porter. I stared at it for 3 full rings, my thumb hovering over the decline button, but something made me answer. Maybe it was the same instinct that made me hit record 8 years ago. The part of me that needed to know what she wanted, needed to document it, needed to see the shape of the trap before I stepped into it. Hello, Elena, darling. The voice was honey-dipped, warm, familiar in a way that made my shoulders tense before my brain even registered why. It's your mother. Oh, sweetheart, it's been too long. How are you? You sound well. You look wonderful. I saw your LinkedIn photo, very professional. I'm so proud of you. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She filled the silence, the way she always did when she wanted something. Listen, I know we've had our little disagreements over the years. Water under the bridge. Family is family, right? And I need the tiniest favor. There it was. I have a potential investor meeting tomorrow afternoon, she continued, her voice shifting into business mode. A very big opportunity for Patricia's premier events. This could be the deal that takes us to the next level. But I need a professional office space to make the right impression, somewhere with a conference room, nice windows, the whole executive feel. Nothing too fancy, just credible. I could hear her smiling through the phone. And I remembered that you have that cute little building now. The one from your grandmother's estate. I thought, who better to help me out than my own daughter? I just need to borrow your office key for a few hours tomorrow. That's all. A few hours. I opened my mouth, but she wasn't finished. It's the least you can do, Elena. After everything I've sacrificed for you over the years, all the time and energy I poured into raising you, a mother gives so much, and she never asks for anything in return, but I'm asking now. Just this once. Let me use your office. The old guilt flickered in my chest. I felt it physically, a tightening behind my ribs, a reflex I'd spent 30 years developing. The part of me that still wanted to be a good daughter. The part that whispered, maybe she's changed, maybe this is her olive branch, maybe if you just do this one thing she'll finally see you. And then the fury rose up and swallowed it whole. Everything I've sacrificed for you. I thought about the cracked tablet, the piano recital with an empty seat in the 3rd row, the fast food 16th birthday, the academic award ceremony where neither parent showed, 30 strangers holding corporate signs on my graduation day. Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma. I thought about the trust she'd tried to contest, tried to steal from me, even after Grandma was gone. And I thought about the key, the real key, the one hanging on a silver chain around my neck, warm against my skin. Of course, I said. My voice came out smooth and calm, a voice I barely recognized. Come by tomorrow at 10. I'll have everything ready. Her exhale was a rush of relief. Oh, Elena, I knew you'd understand. I knew my daughter wouldn't let me down. You've always been so reliable. Reliable, not brilliant, not successful, not a business owner who'd built something from nothing, just reliable, useful, a resource to be tapped. I'll see you tomorrow, Mom. I hung up before she could say anything else. Then I sat at my desk, in my building, in my office, and I pressed my palm flat against the cool wood surface. I breathed in slowly. I breathed out. She thought she was asking for a key to a conference room. She had no idea what she was really walking into. No idea what I'd kept in a folder for 8 years. No idea what Grandma had written in that letter. No idea that the daughter she'd spent a lifetime dismissing had become someone who no longer needed her approval and who was finally, completely, terrifyingly in control. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the folder I hadn't touched in years, the audio file, the trust documents, the deed. Tomorrow, I decided, she would see everything. I just had to set the stage. That evening, after I hung up the phone, I didn't celebrate. I didn't call a friend or pour a glass of wine. I walked to the filing cabinet in the corner of my office, turned the small brass key, and pulled out the thick manila envelope I hadn't opened in over a year. The trust documents, the deed, and the letter. Grandma Martha's handwriting was shaky, arthritis had made her final years difficult, but every word was clear. I spread the pages across my desk under the warm glow of my desk lamp and read them again, slowly, for the first time since the day the lawyer handed them to me. My dearest Elena, the letter began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've finally received what was always meant to be yours. 42 Maple Street isn't just a building. It's the independence I wish I'd given you sooner. I watched your mother dismiss you for 22 years, and I said too little. This is my apology, late but sincere. I traced my finger over the next paragraph, the one that still made my jaw tighten. Your mother has already contacted my attorney twice, trying to argue the trust is invalid. She claims I wasn't of sound mind, that you manipulated me, that the building should revert to the family estate. She will fail. I've made certain of it. But you should know, she will try to take this from you the moment she learns it exists. Guard it, it's yours. She tried to contest the trust before I even knew it existed. Before Grandma was cold in the ground, my mother was already reaching for what wasn't hers. I set the letter aside and opened my laptop. The folder was buried 3 directories deep, labeled with a date from 8 years ago, May 14 graduation. Inside, a single audio file, 43 seconds long. I pressed play. Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma. These are my guests. Her voice filled the quiet office. Flat, dismissive, final. I let it play twice, then a third time, until the words lost their sting and became what they'd always been, evidence. Not of my failure, but of her character. I closed the file and opened a browser. The state business registry loaded in seconds. I typed Patricia's premier events into the search bar. What I found made me sit back in my chair. 3 outstanding tax liens in the past 18 months. A judgment from a former vendor for unpaid invoices, $47,000. $2 eviction notices from her previous office space. And a public filing from 6 weeks ago indicating she'd taken out a high-interest bridge loan against the company's remaining assets, due in 90 days. She was drowning. This investor meeting tomorrow wasn't an opportunity to grow, it was her last chance to stay afloat. Without an injection of capital, Patricia's premier events would be bankrupt by Christmas. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence. All those years she'd told me I wasn't a priority, that my achievements were small, forgettable, unworthy of celebration. And now, she needed my building to save herself. She needed the daughter she'd spent 2 decades diminishing to hand over the key Grandma Martha had protected from her grasping hands. The irony was almost too sharp to hold. I reached up and touched the silver pendant resting against my collarbone. The key Grandma gave me at 16, when my birthday dinner was a quiet booth at a burger chain, and the only person who showed up was her. One day, this will unlock something just for you. She'd known even then, maybe not the specifics, not the building, not the deed, but she'd known I would need something of my own, something my mother couldn't touch. Now I want to pause here and ask you something, because I've thought about this moment a lot over the past year. My mother said, "Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma." Those exact words. And I've had people tell me since then that maybe she was just being honest, that some parents are blunt, that not every achievement deserves a parade, that tough love builds character. But I've also had people tell me those words were cruel in a way that leaves permanent marks. That there's a line between honesty and cruelty, and she sprinted past it without looking back. What do you think? Did she cross a line, or was it tough love? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know where you stand. Then come right back, because the story isn't finished. I spent the next hour preparing. From my supply closet, I retrieved a small motion-activated camera, the kind I used for property walkthroughs when I couldn't be on site. I positioned it on the bookshelf behind my desk, angled toward the conference table, hidden between a property law textbook and the framed photo of Grandma Martha I'd kept on display since the day I moved in. The camera's red indicator light blinked once, then went dark, recording standby. I tested the angle on my phone. The entire conference table was visible. Every chair, every face, every word would be captured. I locked my office door and went home. I slept deeply for the first time in a week. Tomorrow, my mother would walk into my building asking for a key. She had no idea I'd spent 8 years learning how to lock doors she couldn't break down. The next morning, I arrived at my building at 7:15 a.m. I wore a navy blazer and black trousers. Nothing flashy. Nothing that said I was trying to impress anyone. Because I wasn't, I made coffee for myself, sat at my desk, and waited. At 9:03, the elevator chimed. My mother stepped out first. She wore a coral dress I recognized, the same one she'd worn to Veronica's engagement party 6 years ago, slightly faded now at the seams. Behind her came Veronica, phone already in hand, barely glancing up. And behind both of them, a tall man in a gray suit carrying a leather portfolio. Mr. Henderson. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, the kind of man who'd built something real and was looking for a reason to invest in someone else's dream. "Elena, darling." My mother spread her arms wide, as if we'd last seen each other at Christmas dinner instead of 8 years of near-total silence. "Look at this place. Isn't it perfect, Mr. Henderson?" She didn't wait for me to respond. She swept past my desk, trailing perfume that smelled like department store samples, and began gesturing at the exposed brick wall and the floor-to-ceiling windows like she'd chosen them herself. "The conference room is through here, I assume?" She was already pushing open the glass door. "Veronica, help your sister with the coffee setup. We'll need 3 cups, cream and sugar on the side. Mr. Henderson prefers Colombian roast if you have it." Veronica didn't look up from her phone. "Mom, can't Elena handle the coffee? I'm confirming the catering for Saturday." I stayed seated. My mother's head swiveled toward me, her smile tightened. "Elena, the coffee." "No." The word landed in the quiet room like a stone dropped into still water. Veronica's thumb stopped scrolling. Mr. Henderson, who'd been examining the framed zoning map on my wall, turned slightly. My mother's smile didn't fall, it calcified. "I'm sorry." "I'm not your assistant," I said, "and this isn't your office." She crossed the room in 4 quick steps and leaned down close to my ear. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "Don't embarrass me, you owe me this. After all I did for you." I looked up at her, calm, steady. "You did nothing but belittle me." Her eyes flickered, not with hurt, but with fury barely contained behind a public-facing mask. She straightened up, smoothed the front of her dress, and let out a small laugh for Mr. Henderson's benefit. "She's always been dramatic. Creative types, you know." She rolled her eyes. "Stop pretending you're something special, Elena. Just get the coffee so we can conduct our meeting." There it was, "Stop pretending you're something special." An echo of every dismissal, every ignored recital, every achievement she'd waved away like a gnat. The cracked screen tablet while Veronica unboxed a new laptop. The fast food 16th birthday. The graduation ceremony where 30 strangers held signs for a company that never once held space for me. I stood up slowly. Now, I'm going to pause right here, because in that exact moment I had 2 very clear choices. Option A, pull out the deed and show her, and Mr. Henderson, exactly who owned this building. Option B, pick up my phone, call building security, and have all 3 of them escorted out without a single explanation. Comment A if you wanted me to show the deed right then and there. Comment B if you thought I should call security and let them wonder forever. I genuinely want to know what you would have done. Drop your vote below, then come right back, because what happened next is something none of them saw coming. I reached into my top desk drawer and pulled out the folder I'd prepared the night before. Navy blue, crisp edges, the kind of folder that held contracts and closing documents and things that changed lives permanently. "You want the key to this office," I said. "Let me show you who really owns it." I handed the deed directly to Mr. Henderson, not to my mother, not to Veronica, to the man whose opinion actually mattered in this room. He took it with the careful hands of someone who'd spent decades reading fine print. His eyes moved down the page, property address, legal description, tax parcel number, and then the owner line. He paused there, read it twice. "This is a notarized deed," he said, voice flat. "Recorded with the county. You're the sole owner of 42 Maple Street, Ms. Elena." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson." My mother's laugh came out high and brittle. "That's impossible. That's absolutely impossible. She's 30 years old. Where would she get a building? It's a forgery. She's always been jealous of Veronica, always making up stories to make herself look important." "Patricia," Mr. Henderson closed the folder and set it on the conference table. "I know a recorded deed when I see one." My mother's mouth kept moving, but no sound came out. Veronica finally looked up from her phone, eyes darting between me and the folder like she'd walked into the wrong movie. "That's not the only thing I want you to hear," I said. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, navigated to the voice memos folder, scrolled past work notes and property walkthrough recordings, and stopped at a file dated 8 years ago. May 15th. The day I graduated university. I pressed play. My mother's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "Stop pretending anyone cares about your little diploma. These are my guests." The recording captured the murmur of 30 strangers behind her. The clink of glasses, the rustle of event flyers. And then silence, the silence of me standing there in my cap and gown, phone recording in my hand, absorbing the full weight of what my mother had just said to me on the day I should have been celebrated. I watched her face drain of color, not flushed with anger now, pale, gray, the color of someone watching their careful architecture of lies collapse in real time. That's taken out of context. "It's the exact context," I said. "You turned my graduation into a networking event. You invited 30 strangers. You told me no one cared about my diploma, and you were wrong." Mr. Henderson picked up his leather portfolio from the table. His jaw was tight. "I've spent 30 years building my firm," he said, looking directly at my mother. "I've walked away from deals over bad numbers before, never over bad character. Today's a first." "Mr. Henderson, please, we can discuss this over lunch. I can explain." "You can't explain that." He gestured toward my phone. "I don't do business with people who treat their own family that way. If you'll speak to your daughter like that, what would you do to a business partner the moment it benefited you?" He turned to me. His expression shifted, not pity, which I wouldn't have tolerated, but something closer to professional acknowledgement. "Ms. Elena, if you ever decide to expand into commercial leasing consultation, I'd welcome a call." He set his card on the edge of my desk, nodded once, and walked out. The elevator chimed. Then silence. My mother stood frozen. Veronica had backed up against the window, phone dangling from her fingers like she'd forgotten she was holding it. "You've ruined me," my mother whispered. Then louder, a raw shriek. "You've ruined me. That investor was my last chance. Do you understand what you've done?" "You ruined yourself," I said it calmly, quietly, the way you state a fact that has always been true. "I just stopped hiding the evidence. Now leave." "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." I pressed the button on my desk phone. "James, I need an escort for 2 guests on the 3rd floor. They're leaving now." My building's security guard appeared in under 90 seconds. James was a retired cop, broad-shouldered and unfailingly polite, which somehow made it worse for her. He didn't grab anyone. He simply held the door open and waited. My mother snatched her purse from the conference table. Veronica followed, face unreadable, still silent. At the elevator, my mother turned back. Her coral dress looked cheap under the hallway fluorescence. Her mouth opened, maybe to curse me, maybe to threaten, maybe to try one last manipulation. I closed my office door before she could decide. The latch clicked, the lock engaged, and I stood alone in the quiet of my building, the building my grandmother had protected for me, the building I'd earned the right to defend, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 8 years. 2 months later, Patricia's premier events filed for bankruptcy. I found out the way everyone else did, a brief notice in the business section of the local paper, buried between a ribbon cutting for a new dry cleaner and an obituary for someone's beloved golden retriever. My mother's company, the one she'd poured decades into, the one she'd chosen over my piano recitals and my 16th birthday and my university graduation, dissolved in a single paragraph of newsprint. The foreclosure on her house followed 6 weeks after that. The 4-bedroom colonial, where Veronica's Sweet 16 planning committee had gathered around our dining room table. The backyard where my mother had hosted client barbecues while I sat upstairs doing homework alone. The front door she'd walked through after telling me no one cared about my little diploma. All of it went to the bank. Veronica called me exactly once, 3 days after the boardroom. "I can't believe you humiliated us like that," she said. "No hello, no how are you. Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "What are they saying?" "That you're vindictive, that you set her up." I did set her up. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing a lease agreement for a new tenant, a small accounting firm that had outgrown their previous space. I set up a meeting she asked for, in a building I own, and I told the truth. If that's a setup, Veronica, then the truth is the trap. She had no response to that. The line went quiet except for the faint sound of her breathing. "Mom's going to lose everything," she finally said. "Mom lost everything a long time ago. She just hid it behind other people's money and other people's patience." Veronica hung up. We haven't spoken since. I got the details of my mother's new life through the grapevine, my father's sister, Aunt Clara, who'd always sent me birthday cards even when the rest of the family forgot. She called one Sunday afternoon while I was painting the second-floor hallway of the building, roller in hand, speaker playing soft jazz from the corner. "She's in a studio apartment over on Clover Street," Aunt Clara said. "One of those buildings where the heat clanks all night. Got a job at the home goods store in the strip mall, you know, the one with the permanent, now hiring sign in the window." I didn't feel triumph. I thought I might. I'd imagined that moment for years, the moment my mother finally understood what it felt like to be small, to be overlooked, to be told that nothing you did mattered. But when the news came, what I felt was quieter, lighter, like setting down a weight I'd forgotten I was carrying. "She told someone at the store that you stole her inheritance," Aunt Clara added. "Said the building on Maple Street should have been hers. The building Grandma left me, in a trust, that she tried to contest and lost." "I know, sweetheart, everyone knows." That was the thing, everyone knew. And for the first time in my life, the story people told about me wasn't the one my mother had written. My own business grew. Quietly, steadily, the way things grow when they're planted in good soil instead of toxic ground. By the end of that first year, I'd filled every vacancy in the building. The accounting firm on the second floor referred their clients to me for commercial space. A dental practice took the ground floor suite and signed a 10-year lease. The executive office I'd claimed for myself became the headquarters for a portfolio that expanded to 3 more properties by the following spring. I hired 2 employees, then 4. James, the security guard, started calling me boss with genuine affection instead of just job duty politeness. Mr. Henderson did call, as it turned out, not for consulting, but to introduce me to a colleague looking for managed office space in the next county. We shook hands over lunch 6 months later, and he never once mentioned my mother's name. One evening the following autumn, I stayed late at the office. The last tenant had locked up at 6, and the building settled into that particular quiet that old buildings have, the hum of the HVAC, the occasional creak of settling wood, the golden slant of sunset through the windows. I was sitting at my desk when the light caught something at my throat, the silver key pendant. Grandma Martha's gift from my fast food 16th birthday, the one my mother had dismissed as costume jewelry. I'd worn it every day for 14 years. It was small enough that I often forgot it was there, but that evening the sunset found it and set it glowing against my collarbone. I unhooked the clasp and held it in my palm. The metal was warm from my skin, tiny and unremarkable. Easy to overlook. My mother had needed my office key, had demanded it, in fact, as if it were hers by right. But the key she'd actually needed, the one that would have unlocked a different kind of life, a different relationship, a different legacy, was something she'd never understood how to hold. It wasn't a building. It wasn't a deed. It was the quiet certainty that I had value whether she recognized it or not, that I could build something solid while she built things on sand, that the scapegoat could become the steward of her own life and lock the door behind her. I slipped the chain back over my head. Then I closed my laptop, locked my desk drawer, and walked out into the cool evening. The streetlights were just coming on along Maple Street. My building stood solid and quiet behind me, every window dark except the one I'd just left. That's my story. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been told you weren't a priority, that your achievements didn't matter, that you should stop pretending you were something special, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me about a moment you chose yourself. Hit subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.